Cute. Okay, let's start. Hello, GACon. I'm Carrie. Some of you may know me. I'm appearing twice this year. I apologize for all of you. I'm an accessibility designer, and this is my talk, Inclusive Design Workshops, Weaving Accessibility into Workflows. Oh, wait, I need a clicky thing. Cute. Also, I'm sure that hopefully most of you know what inclusive design is. It is designing with disability and capability in mind so that we can avoid barriers. Anyone that is familiar with my first GA conference talk, An Indie Approach to Accessibility, will know that this was not the case for SkyTales. We got quite near the end, and while my mentor Mac will know that the talk was almost called Crowbarring in Accessibility, and I think that tells you about the workflow there. But we had some really good results still, so it kind of proves it's never too late, but it is good to think about it early. Inclusive design is incredibly effective in avoiding retrofitting stuff. You can weave it naturally into your workflow. But Puny was a team of less than 20, and when I moved to a new company that had almost 500 people, it was very clear that I was going to kind of struggle with managing a lot of the projects that were going on by once, and I've completely messed that up. Sorry, I'm trying to like scroll through my notes. Oh gosh. Oh, there we go, cool. A wise person once said that accessibility takes an army, and that's why I needed to train developers in inclusive design, and this led me to look at inclusive design workshops. And where did I start? With Tara. I started with Tara. At JConf, on her talk on inclusive design sprints in 2019. This was the jumping off point for my workshops. If you haven't watched this yet, go and watch it. It is fabulous. So Tara's design sprints were really amazing, but the workshop at this company had a different number of goals to achieve. So some of them were the things that had to be low cost in both budget and time for participants taking part and for the company running it. We were going to be delivering it like to all the staff that would be joining, so it needed to be something that was going to be easily repeatable. And it needed to be easy to deliver both remote and in person to fit the hybrid working model. It needed to be approachable for someone with no knowledge of accessibility. And then where Tara sprints were specific to designing like features for projects, this was more of a general introduction to accessibility. But there were some overlaps. Making it interactive and practical so that people could actually test their learnings is a great start. And including learnings from disabled players. So I developed a workshop that lasted about 2 to 3 hours. It has a short introduction on accessibility, disability, and barriers, followed by 4 key sections: user stories, identifying barriers, inclusive design practice, and then a presentation and wrap-up section. So the user stories section, it grounds the workshop in users from the start. It shares stories from subject matter experts and their lived experience to understand accessibility barriers more deeply. So I created about 5 to 7 minute video of clips from some of JConf's lived experience playlists that highlight the experiences of different gamers with different capabilities. This video introduces participants to real people with real disabilities and helps them to see from their perspective. It's a really short, condensed look at accessibility, but it's the very first thing that we do, and it centers that workshop on designing for real people, the people that we are designing for. Let's address the elephant in the room. Videos are not a replacement for lived experience or consultancy. I probably don't have to tell you that, but just for the general audience, the reason that a video has been used is because of the fact that we needed to deploy this on a wide scale. It's been run over about 15 sessions across the 2 years that I've been there and to over 100 developers at this point. And it's something that like when people join, I put them on a list. And when we have enough people, we run another workshop. And we need it to be quick and we need it to be something that we can get aligned on accessibility easily. So it's trying to establish that base level of confidence with knowing what accessibility is, designing for people with different capabilities. I do have other training that I run, which does use charities, consultants, and that's more specialized. So we're just trying to create something general and introductory for people. So this kind of introductory video can be people's first experience of designing for people with disabilities. So a tip that I have, which is slightly covered by the subtitles, I apologize. I made a whole bunch of space at the bottom of these slides for subtitles and have been wronged by the system. But I made an attempt. A tip I have is to provide time for a Q&A afterwards. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. and provide, note down questions for FAQs. So one of the questions I frequently get asked from my video is, what is Copilot? So I have a nice ready-made answer there to go. So then after this video, we move on to our first interactive exercise, which is around user stories. A user story is a process that allows you to capture the description of something like a software feature from a user's point of view. It's commonly used in user experience, and a key point to make is any named persons are fictional, but they're grounded in research. So as an example, in the video, I show a clip from Jamie and Lion talking at accessibility at JConf again. And I really like that they talk about their experience with audio processing. They find it difficult to process sounds in games. They prefer dialogue from characters or visual cues to tell where a sound has come from. So writing this as a user story for my exercise, it looks like as a player with different audio processing capabilities, I want audio feedback delivered through dialogue and/or visuals so that I can act upon it. As accessibility is a really huge spectrum, instead of writing lots of big detailed user stories, I went for this kind of single line approach. So it's broken down to the user and then the barrier/solution. And then, so what I prepared was an exercise in user story sorting. So on the board right now is a screenshot of Microsoft Whiteboards. I've got a highlight around some sections of the sides, which are showing 4 different groups of people. So this example shows a player with low vision, a player with limited mobility, a player with deafness in one ear, and a player with memory impairments. The tip that I have, each user has a little description to help participants get more context. Again, this might be the first time that somebody's looking at designing for people with disabilities. I try to use charity websites where possible to ensure that the descriptions are reputable and respectful descriptions. So for example, a player with low vision is someone who has some ability to see but is impaired. They may be able to see light, colors and shapes, may have trouble reading street signs, recognizing faces or matching colors to each other. Also on the whiteboard in the middle, oh no, that did not work. Sad. There we go. Also on the whiteboard in the middle are a whole bunch of the barrier and solution sections, are a whole bunch of the user stories, which you then take and you move into the various users. These include things like, I want all important visual information to use multiple sensory channels, i.e. audio cues and haptics, so that I don't miss anything. So all the participants have to do is just move them into the relevant user, and sometimes they can apply to multiple users. So I usually accept them in any category, or I do encourage duplication because it really helps to show that, one solution doesn't just help one person, it can help multiple groups of people. Participants have about 10 minutes to complete this exercise, which they do in breakout rooms or small groups if they're in person, and then I go through the boards and answer questions, give people an opportunity to ask anything that they want to know. So section 1, recap, lived experience video, an interactive user story task, and reviewing it and answering questions. So section 2 is identifying barriers. So this gets developers in the mindset for examining work for unintentional barriers. This task is quite straightforward. We have a group whiteboard that has 4 sections, visual, motor, audio, and cognitive. And we get them to think about barriers that exist in different games. A tip that I have is to dual code your materials. I've used color and text and an emoji for each topic. It's important that your accessibility workshop is as accessible as it can be. Irony. Participants fill out these sections with barriers that they identify for about 5 minutes, and then we review them as a group. For best approachability, so Whiteboards has started doing this thing now where it tells you who's written what thing, and it'll be the same kind of thing for Miro. I think you can turn it off, but I never call out a person specifically. I say, does anybody want to talk about this? And if they don't, then I try to talk about it as best I can. So in this example of audio, there are some things written down like in a first-person shooter, not knowing where I'm getting damaged from, finding it hard to hear speech over other audio, if there are sudden spikes of volume, and not knowing the intonation of a conversation. Another tip, reference game examples when you do the discussion part of this, talk about what other games have done, provided that you are running the workshop and you should have some knowledge of accessibility in other games, you'll be able to say, okay, well, this is what this game did to combat this barrier. And that really helps to give additional context to the developers and see that there are other things that exist at the moment that are solving these things. As a tip, people can sometimes be a bit hesitant to be the first one to like write something. So I do actually give them a really sneaky formula using the user stories that they just did to be like, this is how you can find the barriers in those user stories. And that helps to kind of get the ball rolling. So to recap, section 2, a group exercise where participants examine a genre of game and then have a discussion about the barriers that they've raised. So after a short break, participants return and are split into small groups for inclusive design practice. This is where we put into practice everything that we have learned about so far, the users that we are designing for and their capabilities, the unintentional barriers that occur as a result of mismatch, and now introducing solutions. Problem solving, that's what game design is. It's great. So we use whiteboards again. Step 1 is simple. It's just pick an example that's relevant to your discipline and that the whole group is familiar with. I usually put down a suggestion at the top of the whiteboard, kind of based on the discussions that have been going on so far, and this helps to speed that process up. Step 2 reuses the exact same template that we just used in identifying barriers, so the visual, motor, audio, and cognitive sections, to get them to identify barriers in their example. And then step 3 is solutions. Take those barriers and solve them. So this is where the most creative part of the workshop is, and it's what designers are trained to do. And what is wrong with me? I apologize. This clicker is not my friend. I might just have to do it the old school way with a mouse. I like to stress to people the solutions can't be too big or too small or too out there. This is all about being creative. This is what game design is all about. And the one thing that I do recommend is be cautious with like what games your teams pick. Some people who are less confident in accessibility can benefit from picking games that they haven't personally worked on. Because I have found that if sometimes people pick a game they've worked on, they're not very confident, then they get bogged down in things like, oh, but we can't do this because this exists in the game. They just know the game too well and they're too close to it. But some groups that are more confident work really well with looking at their own games from a critical perspective. So use your best judgment. So that whole exercise takes about 30 minutes in breakout rooms or small groups. They choose an example, they identify barriers in the example, and then they craft creative solutions to those barriers. And the last part is all about presenting and wrapping it up. So section 4 is where we get the groups to present their work. And here are some examples. So this is Skyrim. Anybody who knows anything about me knows that I really love Skyrim, but let's be honest, the skill tree system is maybe not the most accessible thing in the world. I love you to bits, I really do. So some of the things that our UI designers have brought up are, how does someone with no vision know that they've unlocked an ability? So adding like menu narration would be a solution for this. Someone with a vision impairment, the contrast is quite poor in some areas. So something to bump the contrast up, push back all the colors in the background so that these constellations are much more high contrast would be great. A motor barrier was that on console, you're only able to navigate with the stick as opposed to the D-pad. So it doesn't support digital inputs. So add D-pad navigation or digital navigation. And then a kind of cognitive barrier is that the categories for each skill tree are visible when leveling up. So there's quite a lot of information on the screen at one time. So kind of reducing what is shown at once would be a good way to reduce that. And then this is an example where some audio designers looked at stealth takedowns. So the large post-its are the solutions and the small ones are the barriers that they solve. So to help players tell if an enemy is facing them, the suggestion is to add like a passive breathing sound so that it's occluded when the enemy isn't facing you. And this helps someone to know if the target that they're trying to take down is looking at them or if they're not, or if there are other enemies nearby that could witness the takedown. There's nothing audibly that tells the player if they're hidden. So something like having options to adjust the mix or the occlusion if you're hiding in like tall grass, or a subtle loop playing would help the player to know, cool, I'm safe here and I can wait until I can do this takedown. There are lots of body hiding containers around levels, but there's no way to audibly find them. So a suggestion is to give body hiding containers a consistent audio language like recognizable creaks. And then a bit of heads up of the surrounding environment could be done through character talking to self. So something that happens a lot in Sniper Elite is that Carl will narrate what he's doing. He'll be like, ah, yes, the documents I was looking for. And it's really helpful, actually, for giving extra context to a situation. So I give teams 5 minutes to go over their example barriers and solutions, and I leave space for Q&A at the end. And I also like to pick out 1 or 2 things that they talked about that are really good and reassure them that they've done a great job, because that's always good to hear. We want to encourage people to be thinking about accessibility. And I offer flexibility on how people want to do this presentation as well, again, making the workshop accessible. So you can do it as an individual, you can do it as a group. I can present it because I tend to hop in and see what people are working on. You can do interpretive dance, whatever you want. I'm cool with it. After the presentations, I wrap up and I talk about inclusive design practice and how having this accessibility lens allows you to design with it in mind and avoid barriers. And then lastly, I just signpost to some resources that we have. So up on the screen now are things like adverts for our internal accessibility meetups, our Teams channel, and our tester group. So the final section of the workshop involves a series of 3 5-minute presentations and Q&A, a wrap-up that ties inclusive design practice back into their roles, and signposting to accessibility resources. I need to do an apology. This is a huge table showing the breakdown of the workshop with all of the information that I have said. I will share this screen in the Discord after this talk so that you can read it at your own pace and you can have something that you can use. So this is kind of your first takeaway. It is worth very much noting that this is a template. You don't have to do it verbatim. You can change it. You can bring in consultants to do your user stories per section, or you're like relating it back to people, which I would highly recommend. So don't just take this as gospel. This is just what I've done and what works. So this table shows the kind of duration, the activities, what will be covered, and the materials required. The only thing that I haven't gone over is the context that I deliver between each section, making sure that people know what it is that they're actually being asked to do. So, early impact analysis. As part of gathering feedback on this training, we completed a report about halfway through the rollout to evaluate the workshop and how it's going. So at the time of the analysis, there were 60 participants that had taken part, and we had 34 respondents. At the beginning, we asked participants to rate their knowledge of accessibility out of 5 before the workshop and after the workshop. So for those who responded, there was a total 1 average point increase in knowledge, but the participant group who benefited the most were people who were new to the subject matter. So they usually went up by up to 2 points. And this was, as I said, this is supposed to be an introduction. This makes sense. And this is another example where if your team's familiar with accessibility, this is where you'll want to do something more like a design sprint as opposed to an introductory workshop. Relevance and application. So we did some rating on this. The overall relevance was 4.2 out of 5, so very relevant to what people were working on. Application covered how well they could use the teaching, so it was 4.1 out of 5. And only 12% of the participants rated these 2 things low, and they were related to level design. As someone who is not married to a level designer, very rude, how dare, but it's fine. We also asked what the most beneficial areas of the workshop were. The practical exercises heavily praised throughout, and group work and application of knowledge. Many of the things were tied for benefit. So we've got the user stories exercise, people actually learning about the people they're designing for, the challenges and the exercises they were performing, and the group work as well. So it shows that all around it's quite beneficial content and quite well-rounded. So I was really pleased with this. Overall positives that people mentioned were the active participation, very comfortable and engaging environments, that was nice to hear, and breaking up into groups for the tasks. The negatives were for more experienced people, the content was too simple, or they were aware of it already, and level designers did not find it relevant to their design. Again, rude. One of my favorite answers for what is the key takeaway from this workshop for you was to be aware of other players' experiences, as your design decisions could be alienating a whole group if not considered correctly. Lastly, I'm going to go over the feedback and iterations of the workshop. So I have currently delivered it to 103 developers, which is a lot of people. Yay. They're across design, UI, and audio, and the feedback was collected from every session, which meant we were refining the workshop as we were going and seeing how our iterations were going. One of the first things we did is we sort of did a test in terms of in-person versus remote delivery. In person, we found that it created a really good atmosphere that aided discussion. It provided a variety from just people sitting at a desk or being on a Teams call. And the negatives were that we did have some last-minute no-shows because we have a very hybrid model. Physical materials are required, which is sad for the trees. And also there's all the logistical preparation of like, cool, I need a physical whiteboard, I need post-it notes, I need a space to do this in. And when you have multiple offices across the UK, it can be quite difficult to try and get people to one space. Remote delivery was much more approachable from a logistic point of view, as we have people working all across the world, all across the UK. I mean, I work in Dundee, so also me going all the way down to somewhere like Oxford on a regular basis can be quite exhausting and fatiguing and expensive. The Teams integration was really effective, like PowerPoint being integrated in meant that there was so much we could do. The new features like breakout rooms and time management was really good. And it meant that we were able to keep time much more effectively. But the main pain point was using Microsoft whiteboards. It's very limited. If you have any power over what you can use, please don't use this. I'm sorry. I'm not sponsored by Microsoft. No, it's getting better, I promise. It worked fine, it was effective. There are some little things like the text not being able to scale, which some of you will have been able to see from the slides, like having the tiny text was a bit of a frustrating point for this. So comparing delivery remote and in person, the efficacy of the workshop was not impacted. There were similar results in terms of like knowledge gain and engagement. The main difference was that it's more likely to run to 3 hours in person because people are better at talking and I'm not good at butting in and being like, please stop doing this. Whereas if I can just tell them that they only have 7 minutes in a breakout room and then Teams yeets them all back into one group call, that does all of that for me and it's good. I like that. So as mentioned before in the analysis, level designers hate me, but they were sometimes too generic to apply to their role. So this led to the development of focused versions of the workshop. So what I did is specifically for UI, level design, and audio, before I tried to mix all of the developers in so that you were seeing new people, you're working with people that you hadn't met before. But one of the first things that I did is I separated out level designers into their own workshop, UI into their own workshop. And this did the majority of the work for me, to be honest, because you were in a focused group of people that were all looking at it from the same kind of discipline, and it did a lot. During the identifying barriers exercise, I made an effort to provide more contextual examples in those disciplines. So if we were talking about level design, it was talking about, okay, like a motor barrier with doing a platforming section where you get, if you fail, you're right back at the beginning and like you've exerted an amount of energy to get so far and now you need to do the whole thing again. And that really helped. And also just adjusting the user stories for each discipline to reference those better. It worked. It was good. In level design workshops, we gathered some feedback afterwards, and the average relevance went up to 4.5 out of 5, which was great. And application similarly went up to 4.3 out of 5. So this was like a 2-point increase for both of those, which was really cool to see. And then one participant from our level design specific workshops said that the practical task of taking in-game levels and identifying potential barriers to playability was really beneficial, as it teaches level design specific considerations, such as communicating where players are supposed to be and how to set up core mechanics to help them explore the map without undue stress. So success, level designers don't hate me. Some other feedback that we gained from the analysis were things like participants wanted the real game barriers, real game examples for solving barriers. So we wrapped this into the discussions we were having already. There's a lot to fit into the 3 hours. So going and grabbing lots and lots of examples, we had to try and fit it into what we were doing as opposed to like analyzing a specific game. People wanted accommodations for participants who were less confident talking. So that's where the no active calling out participants came for, and the options for me to do talking about the work. And participants got stuck trying to pick examples for section 3, which is why I started providing suggestions for people on what they could look at. Some unaddressed feedback. I would have liked to seen some actual examples of how these barriers are overcome in other games. It's out with the scope of 2 to 3 hours. I can only do so much. So sorry. And then people saying a 3-hour training session was very long. It is a standard short length for an external training session. It was because there wasn't much training that had gone on at Rebellion before. So as more training happened in other areas, this sentiment went down. But I was sort of getting this mixed messaging of, we want more stuff, but we don't want it to be long. So yeah, don't panic. Studio impacts. So I've been running these workshops since May 2022, and while the company have seen the benefits of these workshops, I'm not really able to talk about specific features that we've worked on, as there's nothing that's announced, but maybe those will be the subject of another talk, who knows. What I can say is that there's been an increase in accessibility considerations in documentation, which has been great to see. So we have an accessibility section on our documents, which are more commonly being filled out by developers as they are designing features, which is amazing. There's an increase in ad hoc meetings about design and features. What this means is that my calendar is ruined. But people are like, can I speak to you about this? Can I talk to you about this? And that's great. Like, keep doing that, because this is how we do this. This is meant to give them an introductory look into it, and then they can pull me in and be like, have I done this right? Are there things here? So this has been really, really good. And we've been able to develop some new internal guidance. So like we have now a set of like accessibility heuristics for level design, which a wonderful level designer called Chris has worked very hard on with me. So thank you so much, Chris, for that. Okay. I've got some big scary sheets of stuff. So again, all 3 of the things that I'm about to show on the screen will be available on the Discord afterwards. But this is our little metrics fact sheet. So it's got core information about what people found useful in the workshop, a little bit of mention about the knowledge gain and being particularly relevant to new users, and of course the 31% of gamers experience disabilities from Newzoo and the Game Accessibility Guidelines. Thank you. That's the end of the talk. I want to say a massive thank you to Celia Hoden, who helped me to put this together. I really appreciate it, and I'm very happy that I got to deliver it here at JConf. So thank you very much for asking me.